Hi, my name is Sam Rich, and I'm a senior economics major with a minor in sports media and culture here at Notre Dame. At Notre Dame, I am also a member of the cross-country and track teams, so sports have always played a very important role for me in my life. Being a SMAC minor has allowed me to take lots of different courses where I was able to examine and study sports' relationship with culture and society. One of my favorite courses I've taken here was Professor Grillo's Sport and Society in the Ancient World. In this course, we learned and discussed the origins of sport in ancient Greece, along with spectacles of sport in ancient Rome. As a track and field athlete here, our discussions about the ancient Greek Olympics were very interesting to me, and I learned a lot about the history of the sport I participate here today. Track and field is a staple event in the modern Olympics, with the winner of the 100-meter dash being the fastest man alive. So it was really interesting to learn how the Stadion Run was also the main event in the ancient Olympics, and they named the Olympiad after that. Additionally, learning about the lives of Roman gladiators really sparked interesting discussions about the role of sport and spectacle in the ancient world. Professor Grillo is a professor and chair of classics and Arabic here at Notre Dame. His main interest is Latin prose, focusing on the historiography and rhetoric of the Roman Republic. His most recent book, How to Make Money, An Ancient Guide to Wealth Management, was published by Princeton University Press and was reviewed in the Wall Street Journal. In this book, Grillo explores the daily lives of ancient Romans and how they made, spent, and thought about money. He is currently working on a project titled Irony in Italian Literature. In his teaching and research, he analyzes literature and history through the lens of classics to promote a better understanding of the modern world. Today, Professor Grillo will bring that understanding to the world of sports through examining the origin and nature of sport and spectacle in the ancient world. He will compare the role that athletics played in ancient society to the position that it occupies in our own lives. Please join me in welcoming Professor Luca Grillo.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Sam, thank you.
Oh, yes, sir.
You can go. You can stay, but you can go if you want to. Fantastic. Thank you so much for the generous introduction. And it's great to be intimidating to be introduced by a real track student. So when I taught that class last time, I had, I think, 4 or 5 track students in the class. And I was always harassing them with the question must have sounded so idiotic to all of you guys, because I was training for the Notre Dame Holy Half Marathon. So it was a great exchange of ancient and current and professional and personal sports. What I would like to do today with you is to tell you 3 stories. And for each of these stories, I have like a short set of conclusions, and I hope that we can then have a little discussion and a little debate together. Let me tell you from the start that I'm very happy to be interrupted at any given time. So if there is anything that you do not understand or you want to know more about, actually it helps me to understand what's the point we're at and so forth. Before I start with my first story, actually I'd like to put you guys at work for just a second. I will ask you 2 things. The first is very easy. Can you please jot down a piece of paper or a cell phone these days? Please write down the first 3 words that you associate to sport. The first 3 words that you associate to sports. So if I say sport, what comes to your mind? The first 3 words. This is the easy question. Wait for the next one. Okay, I'll ask you to, oh, I see people are comparing notes. Very good. I want to hear about those very soon. I'll ask you to put them on the side for a moment. Bad pedagogy, but it works. And second question. This is much harder, I believe. Can you please, in your own words, write down a definition of sport? You are writing a dictionary, it's going to be great, I'm going to buy it, and you have to define sport. Can you please define it in a few specific words for me? All right, again, I ask you to keep it, and we can come back to your definition in 15, 20 minutes, more or less. Now I'm ready to start with my first story. And my first story is from the penultimate book of the Iliad. Many of you may have read it. This beautiful poem has been called the Bible of the Greeks, because it's the very origin, and it sets the values, the expectations, the dynamics, and the sort of Greekness for the Greeks of the next centuries to come. It's a book about war, and it's a book about the expedition of a confederation of different Greek states against Troy, of course. A long war, 10 years, and all the heroes on both sides are worn out and quite, in a way, demotivated. And there's been moments when one would think the Greeks would prevail, and the moments one would think the Trojans would prevail, with ups and downs on both sides. Book 23, we're moving toward the end, it's 24 total, opens on a very sad and sort of dark mood. Patroclus, the best friend of Achilles, the strongest of the Greek heroes who's besieging Troy, just died. He got killed by Hector, the strongest of the Trojans. And book 23 opens with the funerals. People are mourning, very, very sad, lamenting, and just crying a lot of tears. And this is the moment when all the Greeks gather for the funeral rites. So what do? They build a huge pyre of wood, and on top of it they place the body of Patroclus. And then cremation, they burn the body, and then they pick and collect all the bones to preserve them. And I repeat, the mood is quite sad. So they take the bones and then they put some earth in order to fix sort of the pyre so they could stay as a monument for other people to be seen. And then it's over and everybody stands up and it's ready to go home. But at this point, there is a completely unexpected surprise. Wait! Don't go! And this is the point when Achilles, who's celebrating, who's like in charge of the celebration, keeps the people and say, wait, sit down. And people sit down, and Achilles brings out some prizes. You don't necessarily relate this to a funeral, but in the Greek mind, prize, of course, is the word that is agon, and it's the word, athlon, which is the word from which come athletics. So athlein, of course I had to throw some Greek at you guys, means to compete for a prize, and the athletes is the competitor for a prize. So this unexpected gesture of bringing out prizes calls for a competition. And if you were one of those Greeks, you say, what's coming up? What's the competition? And in fact, the next thing we see is that Achilles does call for the competition. And he says, Agamemnon, the leader of the Greeks, the king of kings, and Greek heroes, you all, these prizes await the charioteers. And that's the announcement of the first competition. And now I want to tell you the story of one of the competitors, pretty much from his point of view. There must have been a sudden 180 degrees change of mood. You go to a funeral, and next thing you know, to your surprise, that there is a nice race and a competition. And our friend and our hero, I will stay with him for a moment, is Antilochus, number 4. So there's prizes, people start standing up in this order and say, I want to try, I'm going for it. And they line up. It's 2 horses race with a chariot, and so they line at the starting point, and they're ready. And this is where Achilles, pretty much kind of improvising, says, okay, guys, that's the arrival point out there. Do you see it? Farther out there. That's the meta where you have to turn. And once you get there, you turn and you come back. And the first who crosses the finish line, of course, wins. And everybody says, I got it, and they do it. They line at the starting point, and the big competition begins. So they take their places, and Achilles points them then, and he puts kind of like a referee on the meta to make sure that they actually go around it and not they don't turn before. And the competition starts. And of course, the big fight is for the first place. So the first are the first two who stood up. They must have been pretty confident of themselves and their horses, and they say, I'll do it. And guess what? They are so close. The dash out toward the meta goes like in a blink of an eye. But who comes out first after the turn tells me has a real good chance to win the entire race. And they come out very, very, very close. The horses are almost touching each other, and at every inch it looks like the small gap is getting even smaller and smaller. At this point, they keep racing, and the people start looking at them and, as I said, being very, 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 very close. The people cheer and they start guessing who they think is going to win. And you have different level of funds in ancient Greek. These are gods. These are the ones who carry weight. And here you have Apollo and Athena. And of course, they are not going to stand for the same person. Apollo will stand for Eumelus, and Athena, of course, will stand for Diomedes. This is... So, what does Apollo do? Kind of plays dirty. He knocks off the lash from the hands of Diomedes. And Diomedes gets so angry, he starts crying out of anger while still trying to run. But this is not the end, because next there is Athena. And Athena, as I said, roots for Diomedes. What does she do? Well, first she returns the lash to Diomedes, and then, not happy with that, he breaks the yoke of the other contender. You laugh because you're not on the chariot. What happens next? Full speed, close, neck and neck. Of course, Eumelus falls down. He lies scratching